invited me to go on a pilgrimage, which I did and enjoyed, and so then did the same again the following year. And so we've asked Phil to talk about pilgrimage today, and he's kindly agreed. Before that, we'll start with a prayer. And I'm going to read a prayer that Phil used at the beginning of our walk each day of a 4-day pilgrimage. And actually before the prayer, I'm going to read a sentence of scripture. When we finished the 4-day pilgrimage in a place called Mackeld, which is on the east coast of the Isle of Man, in the very ancient church, there was a pillar with a notice written with the words of Jeremiah 6:16 written. I'll read those and then we'll just have a prayer as well. Jeremiah 6:16. This is what the Lord says. Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is and walk in it, and you will find rest for your souls. Guardian of our souls, guide us on our journeys this evening and each day. Keep us safe from harm. Deepen our relationship with you, your earth, and all your people. May we see your hand in the actions of the day. May we see your face in the faces of all we meet, and may they see your face in us. Amen. Amen. So Phil is a native of the Isle of Man, and he lives there and is active there in his local Methodist church, and particularly enjoys exploring the hills and the coast, which I think he must know really well by now. Phil loves walking to recharge his batteries, and he says he's particularly fond of the South West Coastal Path and the English lakes. And as we'll hear during this evening, Phil has walked further afield as well and led pilgrimages further afield. I know he has a deep sense of community and of justice and of ethics, and he'd like to see a fairer division of the world's resources. And so he's worked for Christian Aid for a few years. And back in the 80s, he spent a couple of years working in Pakistan with the Church Missionary Society, for whom he led co-led groups of young people to Russia and Pakistan later. And he's been an ecumenical accompanier in Palestine, so he really has ventured quite far. So Phil leads pilgrimages and guided walks on the Isle of Man, as I've said, and these take in ancient sites, which include the Manx Keeills, which are very early chapels. We might hear a bit more about them. And he guides all the participants in a spirit of pilgrimage, always offering time for reflection, poetry, prayer and silence, and for connecting with one another, with creation and our Creator. Phil, you have a real immense joy in pilgrimage, and it has deep meaning for you, doesn't it? So would you tell us more about why that is and how that is? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine, and apologies for my phone going off just at the wrong moment there. Yeah, it's lovely to be here this evening and see some faces familiar and unfamiliar, and I deeply appreciate the invitation from Green Christian, and I hope to learn more about it as we open up and discuss later on this evening. Catherine, as she says, has been a regular visitor of the last couple of pilgrimages we've done over here. We try to do an annual one along the Triskelion Way, and I'll be speaking more of that in a few moments. I've tried to put together this evening in a PowerPoint some images and words. I hope they don't come over as my favorite holiday snaps. And I'm trying to illustrate what I think are, for me, the key elements of pilgrimage. This is a very subjective choice, and I hope there'll be time to flesh this out and discuss in our small groups later, and then come back for a discussion and a closing prayer at the end. I hope that's okay. But first of all, before we look at the PowerPoint, I'd just like to read a poem. It's called "Don't Delay" by Nancy Billas, and for me it speaks of the urge to wander this amazing and beautiful planet of ours. True pilgrimage begins and ends in the heart, with a relentless restlessness that whispers, "Why do you delay?" I know you feel it too, this longing to be gone, to brush your hands against some ancient stone, sensing centuries of prayer absorbed, to hear the chants of strange birds in an unfamiliar sky, to discover new words of hope with which to soothe a troubled world. We can sing all the way there, or else observe silence in prayerful anticipation of the wonders we will see. Like travelers of long ago, we'll use our soul's compass to chart the road. But let's be going. There's no time to lose. Love awaits us on the other shore. Pilgrimage is a phenomenon common to all religions and going back centuries, if not millennia, throughout the world. Every culture, religion seems to have a place for pilgrimage. And we can see, even within the Western, the wider Christian tradition, medieval and even Anglo-Saxon pilgrimages, which would go to Rome, to Santiago, to Jerusalem, and even in a British context, often to Canterbury. And so I think it's important just to get that universality of pilgrimage throughout time and space in our minds, which we share. So if we could start, David, the PowerPoint, please, if we could share some of that. Thank you. So if we go on to the next slide straight away, please. These are just words, and this is what these are some of the key topics which I think go to make up pilgrimage. As I say, it's a very back to the words, please, David. Thank you. Oh, well, there we go. That's it. We hold that one a sec. So what is pilgrimage? This is a very personal and subjective list, but these to me are the some of the key attributes, I think, and we'll flesh these out as we go through the images. It's about taking a journey. It's keeping on, keeping on. It's through God's creation. I think a theme which I know will resonate to Green Christian. It's with some sort of sacred purpose, and I use that in a wider sense of spirituality. It's in community. It doesn't have to be, but it usually is, along with others. Sometimes it's difficult. It's not always easy, but it does give an opportunity for us to slow down and to be open to change, to what the Spirit might be saying to us. So those are kind of the headings that I'd like to hang my remarks on.
Sorry, Phil. I'm going to ask you if you can possibly come a bit closer to your microphone.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Am
I?
You're mostly clear. We just need to make it perfection.
Yes. Is that better?
That's super. Thank you, Phil.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So, David, if we can start the slides, and as I say, we're just going to look at these one by one. So the first one there is a journey movement. I'd like to, the slides are taken from a mixture of two pilgrimages that I've been on. One, this was over 10 years ago now, going to Santiago. You can see that on the left of the map there, through northern Spain from the Pyrenees. It recreates the pilgrimage that was done as early as the 10th century. There is St. James at the bottom right, the medieval pilgrim. St. James, according to tradition, and a little bit of history, if you're a bit skeptical maybe, but he is meant to be buried in Santiago there, Santiago being the Spanish for St. James, and this is where he evangelized in the 1st century. And the next slide, please, David. And there's the route of the Triskelion Way, lesser known to you. I should have labeled that Triskelion. It's Triskelion is the national symbol of the Isle of Man. You might be familiar or not with our three-legged flags. That's a Triskele, and this is the Triskelion Way that wends its way for 37 miles, 60 kilometers across the Isle of Man, which we do in 4 days. So trying to get the idea of continual movement across there. So next slide, please, David. And here we are. So it's a journey. I think it's important that we recognize it as leaving home, leaving our routine in some way. A pilgrimage could be 1 day, or it could be a lifetime, or anywhere in between. We've got armchair pilgrimages, pilgrimages of varying durations. But I think the important thing is it's coming out of our routine and casting off our moorings and being open to the work of the Spirit. Next slide, please. Still looking at this movement. It's moving on each day, usually by foot, but sometimes it could be by cycle in the Camino, for example, or even motorbike, or even on a case we came across someone doing it on the saddle of a donkey. But it's moving. It's not lingering. Often on the Camino, the basic hostels, albergues, would only take you for one night, and then you were obliged to leave unless you were poorly. Next slide, please. Yeah, this idea of moving on here. This is the symbol, the yellow arrow that you see everywhere on the Camino. It makes it very difficult to get lost, and you can see the representation of the scallop shell there, which is the symbol of the Camino. Pilgrims often, when they arrive at Santiago, it's not quite on the coast, but you can spend another couple of days actually going to the coast, which medieval pilgrims did, and pick up a scallop shell as a symbol that you've completed the journey. Next slide. Again, from the Camino, don't stop walking. Keep going on. Journey moving. I think perhaps the journey is maybe more important than the destination. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, okay. Here we are. So Judy, my companion on the Camino, and there's a lot of graffiti on this milestone, but it's actually indicating 100 kilometers to go. So that was an important psychological point for us. Next slide. Yeah, moving on now. In God's creation, you may or may not be people of faith I'm talking to this evening. I guess many of you are to belong to Green Christians, but I said I wouldn't show my holiday snaps, but some of them really are beautiful. And here we are, just I think this was day 2, just after crossing the Franco-Spanish border at the watershed of the Pyrenees. So I think it's taking time out to go into nature. And I think that's a good rule for everyday life. I know sometimes if I've been on the computer, the laptop too long, even at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, I'll go out for a walk, maybe a park or a woodland or by the side of a river at any time of day. I close down the laptop and just to settle the mind before bed. And it's good. I think it was the Dalai Lama that urges us to go somewhere green each day and just appreciate nature and settle our minds. Next slide. I think there's a series here of in God's creation again, crossing main big rivers in Spain over beautiful bridges. These are obviously the built environment, but next slide again, please. Yeah, lovely to appreciate the sunrise, and I think as you go on, you become more attuned to the natural rhythms. You're looking at your watch less often. Is my voice okay now? Can you hear me all right?
Yes, thank you, Phil.
That's
Yes, wonderful,
okay,
thank you.
that's fine. And next slide. Yeah, well, there's this next thing I put with a sacred purpose. Obviously, different religions have various purposes and destinations. Indeed, on the Camino, you would meet people with a mix of motives for doing it. Sometimes it would be to keep fit. Sometimes it would be to visit the shrine and the relics of St. James, which are still there in a silver casket at Santiago. Sometimes it's for the journey, and you can see here probably one of the less scenic parts of the journey alongside a motorway, but everywhere you would see wherever there was these wire fences or somewhere to attach or mark a cross, you would often see pilgrims having attached those. And I know I've copied this and put a couple of crosses attached to similar wire here on the island. You'll have to look out for it, Kat, see if you can spot it. So again, some sort of sacred pilgrimage. There's a lot of God talk when we're doing pilgrimage, both here on the Manx pilgrimage and on the Camino. For whatever my motivation is, God, it comes up in conversation very often. I think pilgrimage can touch those who have become disillusioned with organized religion. Maybe they're a bit hacked off with routine worship or the institution of the church. I'd like to think that some find a home and an openness in pilgrimage for their spirituality. Next slide. Again, with a sacred purpose. This is the sign on reception at the municipal hostel in Burgos, and one of the largest cities we walked through. No tourists here. No tourists, thank you very much, in this hostel. Only pilgrims, and again, only pilgrims for one night. You have to move on. Just to underline the distinction there that we're not sightseers, although there's plenty to see, especially in that beautiful city. But a chance to have a special purpose about the journey. Next slide. Here we are, not in Spain, we're back home. This is during the Triskelion pilgrimage, a group of us, this is on the third day of 4. We're pausing here at a keel. A keel is an ancient chapel built usually by the Celts in the 6th to the 12th centuries before the diocese was established. And you can see what it is better than a description, but they're usually they're always rectangular, about 6 meters by 3, with an east-west orientation. Often the remains of the door. They're all in ruins today, but often in remote and beautiful parts of the island, and a very appropriate place for us to stop and pause in silence and prayer. The next slide. Here's St. James, I mentioned him before. Santiago Apostol, I think it says here. And although, of course, he never traveled to Santiago on foot, he's the inspiration of why many pilgrims for the last millennium have come along this route to observe his relics, believing in those days certainly that pilgrimage would lead to salvation in what was a difficult world, a difficult existence with a short life expectancy. St. James was, you will often see right along the route, there with his staff and his gourd for water. Santiago Apostol, very different to sometimes the image of Santiago Matamoros, St. James, the slayer of Moors. It was all very much the pilgrimage was encouraged in Spain in the 10th century as part of the Reconquest to push back the Moors from North Africa, who had taken almost all of Spain. And so St. James has been appropriated not just as a humble pilgrim, but as a slayer of the Moors. I think in the Spanish legend, he appears in key battles to turn the tide and win it for Christendom. Next slide, please. In community, I think is a key element. Yes, you can do pilgrimage alone and be blessed by that, but in my experience, it's more usual to do it with others. And here we are. This is the first night out, still in France actually at this point, in Orisson, high up in the Pyrenees. And these were just people we met at the hostel, and a group of French Canadians, and you get to know each other. You will often walk for maybe several days with a group, and then the cards reshuffle, and you're dealt with another group, and there's always a mix and match going on. So in community, there's a common band, there's a uniting force on there, which is exemplified too by that Burgos hostel sign, only pilgrims, no tourists. Thank you very much. Next slide. Here we are, same thing, different environment, setting out on day 2 on the Triskelion Way from Peel. And you build relationship as you go on. You can walk alone, of course. You can walk in twos. You can walk in a larger group. And you pause every so often for water or a prayer, and then the cards are reshuffled. And if you're bored stiff with the company you've been having, you can find another person quite easily. I think the conversations, particularly, if you're going along as a twosome, often with a stranger, it's easier to open up, and all sorts of things can resurface. Next slide, please. Yeah, again, the a hostel along the Camino, and this again sums up the togetherness of being there. Next slide. Here we are again, walking in a group back home, and about to pause for lunch, and again stops for food. It's just table fellowship. There's a picnic table just ahead, and again that's a great time for sharing physical food, but also sharing our stories. Next slide. Yeah, okay, life on the Camino. It's not always easy. Sometimes you're like sardines in a hostel, but it's affordable. It's accessible. It's 10 euros a night in somewhere like this, and yeah, there's all sorts of noises going on in the night. I won't say more, but here we are. Those are all bunk beds as well. You're only seeing the half of it there. You might see there's lower bunks, and yeah, it's in community. Next slide. Yeah, as what I was saying, here we are back here, and yeah, all sorts of conversations can open up between what had been strangers up till now, but talking together. Next slide. Yeah, in community, this was Lena, an 18-year-old German girl who we met, and somehow she attached ourselves to us, and we attached ourselves to her, and we walked for 3 or 4 days together, and lovely relationship built up. She subsequently visited us in the Isle of Man, and another perspective. She just come out of her school in Germany, Steiner School, and was very much questioning what next, and questioning the reason for life, the reason for living. And so some great spiritual conversations with Lena. Next slide. In community, these were people who were not traveling with us, two young men who had set up their stall literally on the pathway, selling local delicacies and items they baked. They explained to us, and those of you who speak Spanish, they were unemployed, and they're doing this as a means to get resources, but very much in solidarity with us on the route, and not just for selling wares, but selling their story too, and vice versa. Next slide. It's not always easy, as that dormitory showed, and pilgrimage can and is maybe meant to be difficult at times. Pilgrim's Progress, you think of the book by Bunyan, all sorts of obstacles in Pilgrim's Way. And here's Judy and Lena, the German girl, still with us. These massive haystacks appeared, regularly along the route, and all piled up. You'd never see this in the UK. And they offered shade. This was late August, and it was still scorching, and so we would seek these places out. And if you look closely, not too closely, they're actually tending to that. Judy is tending to her feet here, and we discovered Compeed plasters, wonderful second skin, and and the next slide will show. We won't linger on this, but that was my foot, not in a good shape. You can see a Compeed plaster around the back of the heel too. So yeah, pilgrimage is not always easy, but again, that brings solidarity. Everyone has their own recipe for dealing with blisters. It could be needle and thread, it could be a Compeed, it could be amputation of the blister, even, not the foot. Okay, next slide. Slowing down, yeah, that's important. Whether it's within a day or whether it's within a month. My experience was that after a few days, I stopped looking at my watch, and we we had a contest to tell the time of day by the length of the shadow. How many sticks length the shadow was at a particular time of day. We found it less necessary to look at our watch, which I've never experienced before, or even since. And so a sense of dropping down a gear or two, and becoming open to what the Spirit has for us. And that's the next slide, please. Yeah, open to change. I passed these wonderful trees, and before I arrived at this point, I heard the trees whispering, the wind rustling in throughout the tree, and I was moved by it. I just felt very close to God at this particular point, and I could hear God in the tree. It struck me with some force, and I chose to believe. Next slide. Yeah, here we are, and open to change. And it's a few days maybe after that earlier trees came across another one, and it had, not on this slide, but not adjacent to it, further along, was a tree not in full bloom like this one, but without any foliage at all, even though it was late summer. And okay, old and new together is something happening here. This was also on a day where, after over a week of scorching sunshine, the weather broke suddenly in a thunderstorm. It was also the day when I saw two dandelions side by side, one in full flat yellow flower, the other had gone to seed. And okay, what's going on? And that same day we arrived somewhere, Next slide. I think it's the next slide. Yeah, a place called Villambistia. That's a T towards the end. Villambistia. Ordinary village. We stayed the night in the albergue, the hostel, and I was perturbed. These signs of change, and went into a field under a moon, and what's going on? And I kind of knew what it meant for me. In a way, it was unexpected, but it wasn't a surprise. I knew more than ever now that my life had become too busy at home. There was too much going on. I was juggling too many balls in the air, and that what came to me was that my job, it was the Christian aid job, John, had to go. That was the conclusion, and this struck me with amazing force, and I knew it was God speaking, not in an audible voice, but these signs together were confirmation. And within 48 hours, I'd had a text for what was to come next. It was only a 3-month post, but I knew that was to come, and that I had to change. And the pilgrimage was a catalyst for that to happen. It might have happened anyway. I don't know, but it brought it to the surface in a very meaningful way. Yeah, that was special, and as I say, unexpected, and brought to a head in Villambistia. I think, is that the last slide? Yeah, sorry, we'll go back to that one, the first one. Yeah, we'll pause there because the prayer will come later. But I'd like to close my presentation. You can keep that slide up, David. Oh, that's fine. We can see each other again now. That's nice. But I'd just like to close with a poem as well. This is one from the Irish priest poet John O'Donoghue, who some of you might be aware of. It's called For the Traveller. Every time you leave home, another road takes you into a world you were never in. New strangers on other paths await. New places that have never seen you will startle a little at your entry. Old places that know you well will pretend nothing changed since your last visit. When you travel, you find yourself alone in a different way, more attentive now to the self you bring along. Your more subtle eye watching you abroad, and how what meets you touches that part of the heart that lies low at home. How you unexpectedly attune to the timbre of some voice, opening a conversation you want to take in, to where your longing has pressed hard enough inward on some unsaid dark, to create a crystal of insight you could not have known you needed to illuminate your way. When you travel, a new silence goes with you, and if you listen, you will hear what your heart would love to say. A journey can become a sacred thing. Make sure before you go to take the time to bless your going forth, to free your heart from ballast, so that the compass of your soul might direct you toward the territories of spirit, where you will discover more of your hidden life and the urgencies that deserve to claim you. May you travel in an awakened way, gathered wisely into your inner ground, that you may not waste the invitations which wait along the way to transform you. May you travel safely, arrive refreshed, and live your time away to its fullest. Return home more enriched and free to balance the gift of days which call you.
Phil, thank you. You've given us a real sense of pilgrimage, of letting go, of the layers and the facets of pilgrimage, of journeying and becoming more deeply connected in so many ways. It was fascinating. I was really touched by your description of coming close to God through the sound of the tree as well. So it wasn't just sights, it wasn't just company, community being important. And also I was really touched by your story of change and transformation being the pilgrimage you were on being catalyst, and it was so informative as well when you talked about the different motives for pilgrimage, that some people go for the exercise, some people for the sense of history, some out of as part of a faith journey, and obviously you were referring to the Camino at that point. Do you find that people who do the Triskelion way in the Isle of Man also come with different for different purposes? Has that been something you've noticed?
Yes, I think they do, and there's more of a mix and a match going on. It's small numbers. We're seldom more than 20 on any day,
Right.
but you can get to know each other with that. But maybe some do it all 4 days, some only do it for one, some do it for two or three. So there's more of a mix, a churn, if you like, along there. But I think it has attracted a small number who come because there's a yearning. They're not churched, and but they're interested in spirituality and a deeper life. And much of the society, the culture around us is I believe running on empty, and there's a
Indeed.
yearning for something,
Yes.
which I hope for some pilgrimage will scratch that itch.
Yes, indeed, and you've certainly inspired us. And we didn't say. I believe I'm right in saying that the concept, the Triskelion way was conceived by yourself, that the whole conception of it, and then developed, and then
It was a team effort. I was
yeah,
part of that team, but
yeah,
three of us who were on that team had separately had done the Camino,
yes,
from along that stretch. And I think in each case we'd been inspired. I mean, that wasn't coincidence, but we wanted to then set up something like that locally, something closer to home, so that others might share that experience in a smaller but more local way.
and really successfully. I've just had so much enjoyment myself doing it, and I do remember the pain of the blisters, and I actually remember Phil, you kneeling down and fitting a blister plaster to my foot. So thank you. So we're going to go into breakout groups, and we have a couple of questions. I mean, talking about the value, the purpose of pilgrimage. The first question is, in fact, what do you value when on pilgrimage? And then the second question is, how might you design a pilgrimage in your own locality if you had the chance? Welcome back to everybody. We had fascinating discussion, very wide ranging in our group. Pilgrimage, didn't realize we could range so much with this. So we'd had sort of the intentionality of it. I thought we were only just going into question 2 about locality, our own locality, and we thought how important it is to think about thin places where there's been much prayer, such as those sacred sites, but also nature as well, and that sort of connection. And the value that we place on pilgrimage, that was also wide ranging. So rather than me report back, though, I'll ask if another group would like to talk about whether you've experienced either of the pilgrimages that Phil has talked about, the Camino or the Triskelion Way, or another pilgrimage, and whether you'd like to share anything that you particularly valued about that.
I'll go.
Thank you, Judith.
It only really occurred to me when we're talking in our group that quite often when I've done a pilgrimage, it's as much as about going somewhere, it's about the purpose of the pilgrimage. And I was saying that when with CCA, we've gone to the National Trust AGM each year to press them about not banking with Barclays. We've had usually 2 or 3 days beforehand of walking together as a group. And that walking together has kind of bonded us and given sort of helped us prepare for what we're going to be doing. And so pilgrimage is a kind of preparation for something.
Yes, I would agree. What do you think about that, Phil?
Yes, I think I would agree too. It's excellent preparation, and there was something in one of those poems. think about what you want to get out of the pilgrimage before you set off.
Yes.
And you don't have to. It can come along. God can speak to you in many ways. But yeah, preparation is very good. There's an excellent guidebook to the Camino called Norther. He's the late John Briley, and it's not just a guidebook. It's got excellent maps and route instructions and photos. But it's also there's each day there's a spiritual thought which underlines the journey.
And as you said earlier, it's not about the destination either. It's about the journey, and that journey itself is so meaningful. And Diane, I think I saw Diane on the call, Diane Harrison, and myself were on a peace pilgrimage last Saturday, walking from Birmingham city centre to the NEC because of the arms fair that was there, and protesting about the bigging up of arms and defence and the glorification of that, and saying there is a peaceful way. And that was meaningful in itself. So thank you for that. Sandra Dutson, you've got your hand up. You got a question or a comment? Sandra.
We had quite a wide-ranging conversation, and two of us had, unknowns to each other, been on the same pilgrimage. Well, it was the YCCN bit of the same bit of the book, but it was more linking with the second part. That what I was remembering was years ago, a Methodist minister called Robert Frost, I think, devised prayer walking. And the idea, I mean, I think with all the things we talked about, there was a degree of intentionality. It wasn't for that kind of personal experience, although it was as well. But the prayer walking, I remember this very vividly because we went on a walk, very urban, through Withington. And so it was different kinds of prayer. So it was Thanksgiving for the High Street because of the Citizens Advice Bureau and all the different nationality restaurants. We went past Christie's Hospital, so obviously about intercession. We went along a very long stretch of wall, so it was reflecting on wilderness, and a telephone exchange. So always, I mean, and what it taught me was to look on every walk or journey I go on in a more aware kind of way, and I think, to me, that's part of the value, that it isn't just a one-off experience, if you like. It may have intentionality of a kind to get people to join in with some kind of thing, or it may be that we learn to look upon all of our lives in a different way.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Isn't that true, Phil? We
Very
can
much
pray for industry, development, housing, whatever it is we're passing as we go. And
slowing down and even stopping for greater awareness of what's around us in the moment and what's going on in ourselves.
And Sandra mentioned the YCCN, which I think quite a few people here will know about or perhaps have joined in. It was the Youth Christian Climate Network pilgrimage up to COP26 in Glasgow a few years back. That's right, isn't it, Sandra? YCCN. Colin McCulloch, did you have your hand up?
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. I was also going to mention YCCN. Sandra got in there because I live in Sheffield, as some of you know, and I joined them also for a couple of days, actually. In fact, for sort of 2.5 days, because I joined them just for the evening when they arrived one day on a Sunday, Sheffield Cathedral, and then the following 2 days did most of the walk with them as they trekked west out of Sheffield, across the Peak District. That was really just something I was very thankful for, partly because I was able to kind of just give my little shove to the back of the wagon, as it were, going to COP to make a point about the need for care for creation, but also to do that by engaging with, and I don't mean this at all disrespectfully for all the lovely people of Green Christian, but a slightly different generation. and to hear what they were thinking and so on, and their vigor and energy. Actually, that gives me hope for the future, that there are a lot of folk like that, of that generation, and they're not all just into going to raves or having iPhones or going on TikTok or whatever it is that they call it. But it raised to me the question, and actually ties in with Sandra's comment about urban walks as opposed to country walk, perhaps. To what extent is going to specific places important, and in a way, is that what differentiates pilgrimage from retreat? Although retreat may involve going to a specific place, to go to a retreat house or something in order to get away from the everyday, but that's static, whereas more or less, but pilgrimage is kind of dynamic in a longer frame if you do it for several days, like a Camino or something. And is that necessary, or is it ultimately about finding a way to go on an inner journey rather than actually the exterior? Or is the exterior necessary in order to enable the interior? I'm thinking out loud.
Phil.
Yeah, I think perhaps retreats and pilgrimages we could think of them as overlapping circles. A pilgrimage could be described as a retreat and vice versa, in the sense that both are a time for, I think, getting away from home, getting away from our routine, to be open to change, to be open to the spirit. I think these things apply to pilgrimages equally and to retreats. And I think God can speak through both of them, thankfully.
Great question, Colin. Thank you. And John Craine, you've got a question or a comment?
Yeah, it was really just the business about mode of travel. Really, I just wanted to cite that you can do it both solo and use a bicycle, basically. And I was very blessed when we had COVID lockdowns and we all went a bit sort of stir crazy inside. The second one, we were allowed out for exercise a bit more frequently. And I found myself riding my bicycle around. And I'd been given a 3-month sabbatical by the Methodist church who I was working for. And so I came out of this lockdown thinking, I want to go off and do something, I had a purpose, which was to basically go on a sailing pilgrimage, but for a variety of reasons, it wasn't going to happen. And literally days before this sabbatical turned up, sat there after my morning prayers, and somebody's devised a long distance path connecting, or route rather, connecting all the Anglican cathedrals in the UK. So I was able to do that and link every cathedral, started in the South West. But there was also a further purpose to the mission, which was to deliver an environmental plea letter to all the synods in the Methodist connection. And so all of the mainland connections got a letter from our district in Bristol. And it was, a joy to deliver these in hand, in person, to all of those synods and tick off all the Anglican cathedrals. I should think at least half of them weren't open because that was the sort of post-COVID experience. But it's about the inner journey and the purpose and what happens on that route, which is as much, I would guess that any pilgrimage has to offer. And behind you, you can see the Camino is just next to this. It's north coast of Spain with the Picos de Europe behind you. Anyway.
Oh, that's marvelous. Thank you, John. And that's great that you've got that purpose and the inner journey going on in parallel.
One of the ironic bits, there were many as they, obviously were, but I was born in Chatham in Kent, and as I cycled over the Medway, almost got wiped out by a road transit driver who was intent on I thought, the beginning of my days to end in the same place would have been quite ironic.
Very ironic. I think that near miss
You don't have that on footpaths quite so
resonates
much.
with you, but wow, what a place for that to happen. I'll move on to David Pattinson.
Phil, what I'm just so I won't highlight myself. There's a couple of questions in the chat which you would be too busy to pick up. One of them is the name of the poems that you read, please. The John O'Donoghue one, if you could tell people that one. There's also a question about whether there is a hostel on the Isle of Man. If you can, is part of those pilgrimages, are they hostels or what's the accommodation?
Okay. The poems that I read, I did see someone asking for the names of both poems. The John O'Donoghue one is simply entitled "For the Traveller." For the Traveller, John O'Donoghue, O''Donohue, and the second poem that I started with was a poem called "Don't Delay" by Nancy Billas, Billas. In terms of hostels on the Isle of Man, we don't have many. I mean, last year we stayed at Tidevay, a Christian retreat house in Peel, which was made a great centre. That's closed, but we are repeating the Triskelion pilgrimage over 4 days this year, August 28th to 31st, and so there are places available. You don't have to book, you just turn up each day, but there are many places to visit on the Isle of Man. Just Google accommodation on the Isle of Man and there'll be something. If you want to contact me, I don't know, Catherine, feel free to put my contact details out afterwards. We'll have more ideas of common accommodation, and at least we can stay in the same village perhaps when you come, if you'd like to. That would be great. I did see as well a question about journeying, I think from Kat, a question come up, and it's nice to see Yvonne Dixon here again. She's a journeying fan. She's been coming on journeying holidays for longer than I've been involved. Journeying is a small Christian non-profit organization which specializes. It has a few holidays each year, between 6 and 12 people in the British Isles, to often places on the edge, both geographically and spiritually, usually typically for a few days, perhaps a week, with small groups. And in a way, they are a particular type of pilgrimage, coming together to sometimes do a linear pilgrimage, but sometimes just to explore a locality, taking in places of historic interest, but spiritual thin places too. So that's journeying. It's simply called journeying. Google it for more information.
Great, thank you, Phil. One last question from Louise Petheram. Lovely to see you, Louise. Great to see you.
It wasn't a question, and I don't know if you've time. It was just, it's absolutely, I agree completely with the bits about pilgrimage being community and being with a sense of purpose. But it was great to hear John's comment about that internal, that inner journey, because as he was speaking, the thing that I've done that I think felt most like a pilgrimage would never actually have qualified as a pilgrimage officially, I suppose. When I was selected for training for ordination, I knew it was life-changing. And in essence, I just fled to the Peak District and spent 5 days walking across the Peak District. And with absolutely no purpose at all other than just being available to God. I didn't really know what I expected from it. I just was there, really.
That sounds good, to have not had an expectation, but to have gone to be open. Thank you so much, Louise, for that. I think that quite nicely brings us, after a really inspiring evening talk and discussion, Phil, to the prayer that you are going to share. David's going to put it on screen so that we can share it together and read it together. So it's a pilgrim prayer. I'll let you introduce it, shall I, Phil?
Certainly. Thank you. Yeah, so here's a prayer which is in the first prayer in the guidebook to the Triskelion Way, which we published 3 years ago, and it's by an Australian author called Michael Leunig, Leunig, Another Way of Being. And I'd like to invite you, if we can say this together. I know it might echo a little on Zoom, but that's no problem. If we can just say this together, that would be a lovely way to close. So together, we pray for
another
way of being,
another way
another way of
knowing,
knowing.
across the
Across
difficult
the difficult terrain of our existence,
we have
attempted
attempted
to
to
build
build
the
a highway,
highway,
and in so
and
doing,
in so doing,
lost the footpath.
God,
God,
lead us
lead us to our
lead
footpath.
us
where
in
in
simplicity,
Lead
with
us
speed,
simplicity,
to move at the speed that
to
you're
feel the
pleased,
earth
may
at
move
to
the
feel the
speed
earth
at your
beneath our
Lead us
feet.
there where step
Feel the earth's love beneath our
with me.
feet.
Lead us there where
Step by
step
step,
Side by
I
side,
feel movement of
movement
to
beauty,
embrace
on our
creative
on our hearts.
and lead us
lead
there
us
where
where
side by
side
side
we
we may feel the
feel
embrace
the
of the
embrace
common
of the
soul.
common
The common soul.
Nothing
Nothing
can
can
be
be loved
loved
at
at speed.
speed.
God,
God, lead us
Lead
the
us to
slow
the
path,
slow
slow
path,
path,
the
to the
joyous
joyous
insight,
insight, the pilgrim,
another way of
another way
knowing,
of knowing, another
another
way
way
of
of
being.
being.
Amen.
Do you know, that was just like being on the Camino,
right.
because we were all going at slightly different paces. Sometimes we were saying it together and sometimes we drifted off a little bit.
And like being on the Triskelion Way.
Indeed.
So thank you, Phil, so much for introducing us or reintroducing us to another way of being this evening. I think we've all gained lots of different things and we'll be able to take them with us on our onward journey. And it's been lovely having you with us. Thank you.